To you. Will Daniel's 70th week, that 7-year period that the book of Revelation talks all about, will that, do you suppose, coincide with the typical week of the Jewish reckoning? I believe it does. I believe it will. Does that make sense? Did I say that very well? We're in the 7th year of the 1-week cycle, the Levitical week, if you will. We are in the sabbatical, or 7th year of rest. On September 29th of this year, the Jews will observe their Rosh Hashanah, their new year, which will begin what? Another Levitical week. Another 7-year cycle. Does the 70th week of Daniel, that 7-year period, will it coincide with a Levitical week? My answer, I think so. More on that in a minute. Next slide. Now, we're not done yet. I got to say this, too. Couldn't resist this one. Have you noticed those 4 blood moons right in a row? Passover, Tabernacles. Passover, Tabernacles. Right? You see that, right? Kind of book-ending the Jewish year, our 2015, book-ending. 4 blood moons. Did you know that it's called a tetrad, that only happens one time in this century? And I just showed it to you. NASA said so. Now, does it ever happen in this last century, the 1900s? The answer is yes, it happened twice. That you had Passover, Tabernacles, blood moon, Passover, Tabernacles, blood moon, 4 in a row. It happened twice in the 1900s. Guess what years? 1948, said Mark Blitz, and 1967. Didn't happen in the 1800s, didn't happen in the 1700s, 1600s, or 1500s. It did happen in the 1400s. In the year 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Did you know, and there's a wonderful study that very likely he had Jewish origins, and he left the day, or I should say the night, before the day of the great decree of 1492, the Spanish Inquisition, that all the Jews had to be out of Spain. And that was the other time that you had this tetrad of 4 blood moons. So Mark Blitz at this point is going, wow. So then he looks at the solar eclipses. Does that happen? Next slide, if you would. I want you to see this down here. Mark, so here's these dates. You say, all right, so in the year 2015, there's going to be a total solar eclipse March 20th of the year 2015. He's all, okay, it makes no sense to us. And then in 2015, also there will be a solar eclipse September the 13th. What does that mean? Next slide. He got his Jewish calendar out again. And he noticed that in the year 2015, the solar eclipse is at the end of the year of the Jewish ceremonial year. And the first of Nisan, the first Passover, is going to be 14 days later, where that other total lunar eclipse I just told you about. He went, slide it up a little bit more. What about that other eclipse? It's over here. It's on Rosh Hashanah. What is Rosh Hashanah? That's the new year. And 10 days later will be Atonement, Yom Kippur. And on the 15th, where that other blood moon was, is going to be Tabernacles. Next slide. Is everybody thoroughly confused yet? Let me show you what we're talking about here. Here's what he said. In the year 2014, our 2014 and 15, in April 15th, which is in the Jewish reckoning, the feast of Passover, there will be a full lunar eclipse, a blood moon. And at the end, the other side, the first is Passover, the 7th is Tabernacles, blood moon. Now the year begins with a total solar eclipse. The Jewish year, God's new year, begins with a total solar eclipse on Nisan. And then in Passover, another blood moon. And then trumpets, the first Rosh Hashanah is a partial solar eclipse. And then finally, to end the whole thing, this whole year cycle, is another blood moon on Tabernacles. It's as if God is putting bookmarks at the beginning of 2015, Jewish speaking, and the end of 2015, and saying, pay attention. Go to Genesis chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 14. Then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of heavens to divide the day from the night. What two lights are you think he's thinking about? Sun and the moon. And let them, the sun and the moon, look at this, be for what? Signs. And what? Now we think of seasons as spring, summer, fall. But the word there is moed, and it means festivals, assemblies. Remember those 7 feasts I told you about? The sun and the moon are supposed to be signs. In fact, the word there for signs is the Hebrew word ot. And ot means a signal. If you're following behind a car and his right blinker begins to blink, that is a what? And it's a signal to you that what is about to happen, at least we hope happens. He's going to make a right turn. Here's what God is saying. These feasts and festivals are dress rehearsals. Did the first 3 feasts happen prophetically? Jesus. Passover, unleavened bread, rose on the first fruits. Pentecost has already taken place. There's 3 more to come. Trumpets. Hey, there's a trumpet, right, when Jesus comes back? And then there's the atonement, or Yom Kippur. Oh, if we had time to get there. And then finally, tabernacles, which ends the whole thing. So you guys see how this works? Next slide. What is this? What's going on here? I want to draw your attention to, here's the 7. Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits. Pentecost. Now, these 3 have yet to take place, and they will be trumpets, atonement on the 10th, and then on the 15th, tabernacles. How many of you remember when Moses came down off of Mount Sinai, came down from the Father? He had the tablets with him. And do you remember what the people of Israel were doing that first time he came down? They were partying. What did he do with the tablets? Do you remember? He smashed them. And there was a judgment that happened in and among the people. Then what did Moses do? He goes back up to the Father. 40 more days. He comes down the second time. The first time Moses came down, his word as it was rejected. He goes back to the Father, comes back down again. The second time is recognized. Oh, and by the way, detail. His face shone so much that it freaked out the people. They said, put a bag on your head. Is Moses, and by the way, the rabbis tell us, he came down that second time on guess what day? He came down on Yom Kippur, or Atonement, the 10th. And then in Exodus chapter 35, 5 days later, he begins the building of the tabernacle. What's the 15th? 5 days later, the Feast of Tabernacles. Is Moses a model of somebody? Because when he came down the first time, did his brethren receive him? He goes back up to the Father. Is he going to come down a second time at the end of the tribulation? Are they going to receive him then? And when he comes back down in Revelation chapter 19, his eyes are like a flame of fire. And everybody's all, turn away. Is that a model? Atonement. Something else happens on atonement. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 40, Ezekiel is transported into the future, and he sees the Messiah descend and take and then build the tabernacle, the temple, the third temple, if you will. First temple was built by Solomon, destroyed by the Babylonians.